Welcome to Auto News Talk. Right now the auto industry is just caught in this massive tug of war.
Oh, absolutely. It's wild.
Right. Like, you've got legacy automakers spending absolute fortunes, just billions, trying to force this fully electric, seamlessly connected utopia into existence.
Yeah, they're really pushing all their chips in.
Exactly. But then you look at the average consumer and they're stressed out. They're frantically Googling electric vehicles because fuel prices are spiking.
Right.
But then, and this is the crazy part, they walk onto a dealership lot and end up buying a gas-electric hybrid instead.
Yeah, it's a huge disconnect.
It really is. And while that tug of war is happening on the showroom floor, behind the scenes, manufacturers are fundamentally redrawing their entire global manufacturing chessboard just to survive.
It's a fascinating terrain to map out for everyone listening. Because if you trace the modern car buying journey backward.
Right, which is exactly what we're doing on this deep dive.
Exactly. You start with the global economic pressures that are shifting what buyers actually want. Then you look at how automakers are quietly rearranging their factories. And finally, you end up at the digital minefield that local dealerships face when they try to actually sell these things.
Yeah, so let's start right at the top of that funnel, the friction with consumer demand. Because, we're seeing global conflicts, oil shocks, and it's definitely changing shopping habits.
Oh, 100%. But definitely not in the way automakers originally modeled it in their boardrooms.
No, not at all. It's kind of like wanting to go on a really strict diet, but you just settle for diet soda instead. Like, if fuel prices are jumping so much, why aren't buyers fully committing to electric vehicles?
Well, there's a really interesting analysis we've been looking at regarding oil shocks and EV interest. And the big insight here is that an oil shock absolutely acts as a catalyst for EV curiosity.
Right, curiosity.
Exactly. But it completely fails to convert into actual sales. The report cites AutoTrader data showing that new EV inquiries shot up by 28%.
Wow, 28%.
Yeah, just as fuel prices reacted to global supply disruptions, when the number at the pump goes up, people immediately start searching for a way out.
Well, sure, that makes intuitive sense. You feel the pain at the pump, you look for a lifeboat. But, curiosity is cheap, right? Clicking on an EV listing doesn't cost you a dime.
Precisely. And that is where the conversion funnel just completely collapses. Because in that exact same report, they highlight Cox Automotive data showing that actual U.S. EV sales are down 28% year over year.
Wait, down. So inquiries are up 28%, but the actual finalized sales are down 28%.
That's the reality. It's a massive behavioral gap.
That's nuts. I have to assume the underlying mechanism there is just pure math, right? Like the MSRP gap combined with, elevated interest rates, a sudden spike in gas prices just isn't enough to offset the financing cost of a brand new EV.
You hit the nail on the head. The data puts the average new EV at around $55,300. Right. And you compare that to a standard internal combustion engine vehicle, which is averaging $48,768.
So it's a huge premium.
It is. That premium is a structural barrier for a consumer whose household budget is already stretched to the absolute limit. And because of this math, major players like Ford, GM, and Stellantis are actively tempering their all-electric timelines.
They have to. The consumer simply isn't following them into the deep end.
Yeah, but, the Cox Automotive data also points out something really interesting about behavioral psychology here.
Oh, right. It's not just the price tag. It's the duration of the pain, isn't it?
Yes. This is the most memorable detail from that analysis. Cox points out that consumers typically need 6 or more months of elevated fuel prices before they actually change their permanent purchasing behavior.
6 months. Wow.
Yeah. A 3-week spike at the pump is annoying, sure, but it's not enough friction to make someone take on a $55,000 loan and, overhaul their entire driving lifestyle.
Which means automakers can really only expect an incremental kind of midterm boost for EVs from these oil shocks. We're not going to see a sudden market-wide pivot based on geopolitical headlines.
No, definitely not.
But, what I find frustrating about this data is the limitation of that 6-month metric. Like, what exactly is the tipping point?
Right.
If gas stays high for 8 months, does the charging infrastructure suddenly look more appealing? Or is it just the point where psychological fatigue breaks their resistance? The data doesn't really pinpoint the exact duration needed to permanently shift the retail market.
It doesn't. But what we do know is where those fatigued buyers are retreating to in the meantime.
Right, the middle ground.
Exactly. If they want the financial benefits of stepping away from expensive gas, but they refuse to commit to the high cost and charging anxiety of a pure EV, they go hybrid. Another extensive analysis we looked at makes the definitive case that hybrids are emerging as the absolute dominant force.
It's the ultimate hedge for you as a buyer. You get the battery efficiency for your daily commute, but you keep the gas tank so you don't have to plan your family road trip around, broken public chargers.
Yeah, nobody wants to deal with that. The report cites CarWow data showing that hybrid inquiries are up 43%.
43? That's massive.
It is. And that significantly outpaces battery electric vehicles, which only saw a 35% bump. And the reasoning is just incredibly practical. When they polled people, 54% of drivers said they're actively rethinking their next purchase due to fuel costs.
And how does that break down? Like, why hybrids specifically?
Well, 24% just want the better overall fuel economy. 23% specifically want the ability to drive on electric power without charging anxiety.
Ah, the anxiety is the key.
Exactly. And 19% want the absolute flexibility for long journeys.
It really all comes down to infrastructure anxiety. Nobody wants to be the person stranded in a retail parking lot with 3 kids just staring at a charger with a blank screen.
Yeah, that's a nightmare scenario. And the model-level data backs this up dramatically. A perfect example is the Chery Tiggo 8 Hybrid. Inquiries for that specific model exploded by 149%.
149%? Are you
It's
kidding?
not. It's wild.
That's not a gradual trend. That is a consumer stampede.
It's a very clear signal. The implication for the industry is urgent, right? Automakers have to rapidly calibrate their production toward hybrids as a necessary bridge.
Right.
But we do have to look critically at the CarWow data because there's a glaring blind spot in how it's categorized.
Oh, really? What's that?
The data lumps all hybrids together. It doesn't split standard hybrids, which are essentially just highly efficient gas cars, from plug-in hybrids, which actually require behavioral change for the user to plug them in.
Oh, man. And that distinction is critical.
It's huge.
Because if an automaker looks at this data and assumes, oh, we can just build plug-in hybrids, but the consumer actually just wants a standard hybrid that they literally never have to think about, the manufacturer is still going to misread the market entirely.
Precisely. And the data also doesn't reveal the absolute volume numbers behind those percentage jumps, which makes it a lot harder to measure the total market impact.
Right.
But regardless of the specific hybrid flavor, this shift in consumer demand leaves legacy automakers in a very precarious position.
Yeah, because they've poured billions into EV manufacturing capacity. So if the domestic buyer is retreating to hybrids, how do these automakers compete with the wave of really affordable, pure EVs being developed overseas?
Well, that brings us to the supply side of the equation. Because automakers aren't just sitting still taking the hit. They are getting incredibly creative with their real estate and their corporate partnerships.
Okay, but I have to push back on the prevailing logic here for a second. If legacy automakers in North America are pulling back on EVs because they're too expensive to build domestically, the obvious answer is to import cheaper platforms, right?
That's in theory.
But we have massive, heavily enforced tariffs specifically designed to stop cheap Chinese EVs from flooding the North American market. So how does an automaker actually solve the supply problem without getting totally crushed by import taxes?
Well, you're touching on the exact mechanism of modern automotive geopolitics. Automakers are actively recalibrating their manufacturing footprints to bypass those tariffs.
Bypassing them how?
The strategy isn't to import the cars. The strategy is to co-opt the technology and localize the assembly.
Okay, give me the mechanics of how that actually works. Like, what's a real-world example?
A great example comes from a deep dive report detailing these unprecedented strategic moves by Stellantis. They are currently in early-stage talks to build Chinese Leapmotor EVs at their idled assembly plant in Brampton, Ontario.
Wait, Leapmotor? In Canada?
Yeah. If this materializes, Leapmotor would be the very first Chinese automaker producing vehicles in Canada.
Okay, the irony of using the Brampton plant for this is just staggering.
Oh, I know.
Because that facility was originally idled because Trump-era tariffs completely disrupted the business case for building the Jeep Compass there.
It's a masterclass in irony. Tariffs killed the plant's original domestic purpose, and now Stellantis might revive the plant with a Chinese partnership specifically to dodge a new wave of tariffs.
But wait, I have to push back again. Think about the mechanics of the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. The regional content rules are incredibly strict.
They are very strict, yes.
You can't just ship a fully built battery pack from China, bolt it into a chassis in Ontario, and claim it's a North American car to avoid tariffs. The rules of origin require a massive percentage of the core components to be sourced locally. How does Stellantis get around the battery sourcing requirement?
Ah, that is where the corporate structuring becomes vital. Stellantis didn't just sign a basic licensing agreement. They bought a 20% stake in Leapmotor itself.
Okay.
And more importantly, they hold 51% of their international joint venture.
Oh. So Stellantis actually has the controlling stake.
Exactly. By holding the 51% majority in the international entity, Stellantis controls the localization process. It gives them the legal and operational apparatus to integrate Leapmotor's architecture into the North American supply chain.
Which means they could potentially source compliant batteries while still utilizing the Chinese engineering platform.
Exactly. It is a highly complex maneuver to mitigate import tariffs while fulfilling those regional content mandates.
It's absolute legal and supply chain gymnastics. But are they openly confirming this is the strategy for Brampton?
Not at all. The memorable detail from this reporting is the sheer opacity of their corporate communications. Stellantis released this masterclass of a non-statement, saying they are actively evaluating, quote, conditions for success for the facility, but currently have, quote, nothing to announce.
Conditions for success.
Right.
That translates to, we are aggressively negotiating with regulators and suppliers behind closed doors.
Absolutely. And the broader implication here shows the extreme lengths that global OEMs are going to survive the tariff landscape and actually deliver affordable EVs. They were literally localizing the production of their geopolitical rivals.
It's a strategy of containment and integration.
Yeah. But there's a limitation to this reporting. We are still operating in the dark on the consumer-facing details.
Like what?
Well, it remains entirely unclear which specific Leapmotor models would be localized, or when production could realistically scale up, or crucially, what brand name would even be on the hood.
Oh, right. Would a North American buyer be purchasing a Dodge badged Leapmotor?
We just don't know yet. The data doesn't answer that.
Okay, so let's pull this together so far. We've got a consumer base that is stressed out by inflation, pivoting toward hybrids. We have automakers performing international joint venture gymnastics to build affordable EVs in North America.
Right.
But eventually, those vehicles have to leave the factory and go to a local dealership. And if you've ever tried to navigate a dealership's digital sales process, you know it is often a completely disjointed, frustrating experience.
Oh, it can be awful.
Hmm.
And that operational friction at the dealership level actively kills sales. We've been tracking a comprehensive operational framework that focuses on coordinated multi-channel marketing in automotive retail.
Okay, what's the core idea there?
The central insight is that dealerships must implement a perfectly connected digital journey,
Right.
or they will just lose these highly stressed, price-conscious buyers to competitors who actually do it right.
Because the modern buyer just doesn't tolerate friction anymore. I mean, if I see a price on a Google ad and I click through to the dealer's website and the price is suddenly $3,000 higher.
You're out.
Exactly. My immediate assumption is that the dealer is acting in bad faith. Even if it's just a lag in their inventory API syncing up, the trust is instantly broken.
It's gone. And the framework lays out a rigid structure to solve this. It dictates that the dealership's website has to act as the undisputed central hub. Inventory, pricing, and incentives must sync in near real time across every single platform.
Which is easier said than done.
Oh, for sure. Furthermore, dealerships have to assign specific, disciplined roles to their channels. Like, Google Ads are strictly for high-intent awareness. Email marketing is utilized for depth and vehicle details. And text messaging is reserved entirely for urgency and logistical answers.
That makes a lot of sense. You don't want a salesperson texting you a 5-paragraph essay about towing capacity.
Right. Keep it to the point. And a critical component here is automation. The report highlights a highly specific, memorable scenario.
Okay, let's hear it.
Say a shopper's on the website and they start filling out a test drive form, but they get distracted and abandon it halfway through.
Happens all the time.
Right. The system should trigger an automated sequence that immediately enrolls that person in a targeted nurture campaign. You cannot rely on a human salesperson to manually track abandoned website forms.
No, that's impossible to scale.
Exactly. And according to CarGurus research cited in the framework, a massive 83% of consumers prefer to handle more of the purchase process digitally.
83%. That means the vast majority of buyers basically want the dealership experience to feel as seamless as buying something on Amazon.
That's the standard now. The implication is that visibility and absolute consistency are the foundational building blocks of modern retail trust.
Hmm.
Disconnected messaging actively drives buyers away.
Right.
Now, the obvious limitation of this marketing framework is that it operates purely in theory.
How so?
Well, it outlines a beautiful strategy, but it doesn't prescribe a specific tech stack, nor does it address the massive IT budget required for, say, a local family-owned dealership to actually integrate all these complex systems.
And honestly, that leads to my biggest concern with this entire digital retail push.
What's that?
Well, if a dealership successfully sets up these trigger-based automations, firing off emails, dynamically updating ads, deploying automated text messages at scale, aren't they just creating a massive, highly documented paper trail of potential mistakes?
Oh, you mean for compliance?
Yes. Like, if the pricing feed glitches and an automated text goes out with the wrong lease payment, the dealership just sent a deceptive price to 1,000 people simultaneously. Regulators would have an absolute field day with that.
You have identified the exact systemic risk of digital auto retail right now, and the regulators are already acting on it.
AR.
Oh, yeah. Another deep analysis we are reviewing focuses entirely on this compliance crisis. As the digital expansion of automotive retail accelerates, the regulatory risks are just skyrocketing.
Because the surface area for mistakes is exponentially larger?
Exactly. Good intentions and manual oversight are no longer sufficient. In a major enforcement sweep, the Federal Trade Commission issued 97 warning letters to dealerships, specifically targeting price deception in their advertising and digital communications.
97 letters. That is a sweep.
Yeah. The environment has become so strictly regulated that a compliance company called KPA is now debuting AI-powered audit tools simply to help dealerships survive the regulatory scrutiny.
Wait. So we are at the point where dealerships are using artificial intelligence to monitor their own automated AI marketing.
It is the only way to scale compliance.
Yeah.
The most memorable detail from KPA's rollout is their AI mystery shopper.
What does that do?
This isn't a human clicking around a website. It is an AI tool that literally evaluates the dealership's automated and human lead responses. It parses the CRM data to check how fast the dealership responds, whether the text messages include the legally required financial disclosures, and how the system handles personally identifiable information.
That is fascinating. So the AI mystery shopper basically intercepts the logic in the CRM to ensure the automated text doesn't violate FTC rules before it even hits the SMS gateway.
That is the goal, yeah. KPA is also deploying multi-rooftop dashboards, automated advertising archives to prove historical compliance if they ever get audited, and an ARC certification program that covers 21 different federal regulations.
21 federal regulations just to legally market and sell a vehicle online.
The implication for retail operations is stark. Dealerships must possess contemporaneous, defensible documentation, proving that their daily operations match legal requirements.
They need a paper trail of doing it right.
Exactly. The regulators do not care about a dealership's internal written policy. They only care about the digital footprint left in the customer's chat window.
Right.
However, there is a significant limitation of the current reporting on these AI compliance tools.
What don't we know?
Well, the pricing structures hasn't been fully disclosed, and more importantly, it remains to be seen how smoothly an AI mystery shopper can actually integrate with legacy 15-year-old dealer management systems without causing major data privacy vulnerabilities.
Yeah, integrating cutting-edge AI into a 15-year-old DMS sounds like an absolute IT nightmare for the dealer principals.
It really does.
So, man, we have mapped out an incredibly complex landscape here today. From the geopolitical shocks altering consumer demand to this supply chain gymnastics happening in Ontario, all the way down to AI auditing text messages at the local lot.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. If you had to synthesize this entire journey for the listener, what are the overarching themes we really need to walk away with?
I'd say looking across all the data and strategic moves, 3 clear themes emerge. First, cost is the ultimate governor of demand.
Right.
Consumers might conceptually desire green technology, but as the Auto Trader and CarWow data prove, elevated vehicle prices and financing costs completely override their environmental or geopolitical anxieties.
Pure math wins.
Always. Second, we are entering an era of aggressive creative localization. As we saw with the Stellantis and Leapmotor joint venture, automakers are utilizing complex corporate structures to bypass tariffs and domesticate foreign technology.
Yeah, that's wild to watch unfold. And the third theme?
Third, Digital retail is a double-edged sword. As the marketing frameworks show, dealerships must be omnipresent online to capture the modern buyer. But as the FTC enforcement proves, that omnipresence requires airtight, AI-driven operational compliance.
Wow. And within those themes, I feel like I'm seeing two major market tensions just colliding.
What stands out to you?
First, you have the geopolitical push for electric vehicles actively warring against the consumer's reality. Like, an oil shock spikes the interest in EVs, but the actual market winner that absorbs that consumer anxiety is the hybrid vehicle.
Spot on. That's exactly what the data shows.
Hmm.
And the second tension is the demand for omnichannel reach versus the reality of regulatory risk.
Yes.
Marketing experts demand highly automated multi-channel outreach to capture the 83% of buyers who prefer digital shopping. But simultaneously, federal watchdogs are actively hunting for the exact inconsistencies that those automated systems inevitably create at scale.
It's a tough spot to be in. So what is the practical takeaway for the listener? Like, what does this mean for you, the person who just needs to buy a car without losing their mind?
The practical takeaway is that the winners in the modern automotive industry won't be the manufacturers with the purest, most idealistic EV strategy, nor will it be the dealerships with the most aggressive automated marketing funnels.
Then who wins?
The companies that will actually capture market share are the ones that can seamlessly and transparently connect incredibly complex, legally compliant operations with a consumer who is fundamentally stressed out and just looking for a simple, honest transaction. Operational transparency is the new competitive advantage.
It really all comes down to trust. If the pricing doesn't match across platforms or the technology feels forced, the modern buyer simply walks away.
They do. They have too many options not to. Which leaves us with a final, somewhat provocative question to consider.
Let's hear it.
As artificial intelligence takes over both the aggressive digital selling of vehicles and the strict regulatory auditing of those exact same sales, will the car buying experience finally become the perfectly frictionless Amazon-style transaction consumers claim they want? Or will we completely engineer out the human relationship and negotiation that has defined the traditional dealership model for a century?
Oh, that is a fantastic question to keep in mind. The robots selling to the robots.
Exactly.
Well, definitely look closely at the digital infrastructure the next time you browse a local dealer's website, and pay attention to how many hybrids are sitting front and center on the lot. Thanks for joining us on Auto News Talk. We'll see you next time.